Hey, thank you for dropping in for another episode of Digitally Native. I am Adam O here with I Donate, and I am hyped to bring on one of my good friends, Caroline Griffin from Marketer on a Mission. We're going to talk 25 planning and why it's so impactful and important for nonprofits to be considering at least broad sketches and how. We're going to walk through a couple steps on how to do that. But before we get to the good stuff, Caroline, how in the world are you doing this morning?
Yo, yo, or should I say ho, ho, ho?
Yeah, it's Christmas
Days
time.
before Christmas.
Yeah, when we're recording this, depending on when you're listening, it is literally within short of a couple of days before Christmas. Squeezing one in under the radar. Caroline, how is weather up where you are?
It's actually sunny and warm today by New England standards, but it's been a frigid month, and Adam knows it's not my thing. So I've got my happy light on, and I'm just trying to get through to spring.
What does sunny mean up there? Is that like, so it's like flipping 32 degrees today?
Yeah, it's like in the 40s, but with some sun. We'll take it.
I'm looking at my phone now. It's 64 degrees here and overcast. And this is like normal winter for the Charleston area. You know my feeling. I'd rather be freezing because you can always put more clothes on. You can't take unlimited amount of clothes off, but I digress.
Okay, that's my husband's argument with setting the temp at night, and it drives me crazy.
Yeah, I get it. I understand that. We've settled at like a good 68 degrees solid during
There.
winter,
Perfect.
70 to 72 during the summer. That's, it's too expensive to do otherwise. It's so stupid. What are we talking about today, Caroline, and where we're heading with this? I'm excited because yearly planning, it takes work. It's not easy. It takes some dedication to be willing to sit in front of a computer screen for hours sometimes staring at things. But really, it could be broken down in a couple key components to prep, start sketch, and then put those into motion throughout the course of the year for a digital fundraising plan, right? But before we get there, why in the world should we be listening to you and what you have to say? Like, what is your background?
I
Other
love
than
that.
just some random friend of Adam's that shows up.
Oh, why should we be listening to you? I love that. Well, I've been doing this for almost 15 years. I was in-house with a nonprofit to start, and I was a marketing and comms team of one for 4 years. So if you're in that boat, I feel you 100%. And I'm going to try to approach this conversation with you specifically in mind. I still think it's possible and actually more critical to plan if you're in that boat. And then I went agency side for a while and worked with many, many clients. And now for the past 4 years, I've been running Marketer on a Mission and have worked with dozens more organizations on auditing, strategy, and actually implementing campaigns. So I'm kind of in it at every stage of the process.
You have done it at every level, and you're not just one of these speaking heads on LinkedIn where it's like, you should do this, but we're never going to tell you. And I think that's the great part of this specific conversation is like, you and I both have hands-on experience as solo marketers. Same for me, been a solo marketer for a while. I've done it solo marketer for a small nonprofit. I know the pain points, and we could talk to the strategic step-by-step part of building out a 2025 plan. In this case, we're thinking about this, or you could take these and apply this to any year going forward, which is the dope part about this podcast is like, this probably won't change much in terms of the tactical pieces.
Yep.
So Caroline, I want to start with this one very, to me, startling, but not surprising bit of statistics. This comes from UMA Tech. They did a whole bunch of research, and they have 110 different stats you should know about digital fundraising. I'll link in the notes. But what they pulled and they found is that 313% success rate, they're more likely, sorry, let me rephrase that. I'm so excited about this conversation. Nonprofits that do yearly planning ahead of the time for digital fundraising specifically are 313% more likely to report success, and success being what? Hitting their budget goals for fundraising dollars over the course of a fiscal year than those without one. Just, that's bonkers to me.
Well, it makes sense because if you haven't defined success, how are you going to get there?
You can't track what you don't measure, I think is what, or you can't report on what you don't track, what you don't measure.
All of
something
it.
like that.
It's all true.
Yeah, it's all of it. Hey, but I think that goes into very, very first point of kind of in my head, Caroline, is before I even step in and start planning, I need to know what my top level goals are. From your point of view and for nonprofits, what does that actually mean? What should we be asking about as digital marketers or fundraisers as we're building out this yearly plan?
So if we start at the top, I think it's very rare that a nonprofit defines one primary goal or theme for the year. And often I'll work with an organization and they're like, cool, we've identified our goals. It's growing awareness, lead acquisition, donor acquisition, monthly giving program growth, stewardship, uploading. It's 7 things. It's like all the things nonprofits always want to do. And you should have activities to help you keep like grinding and growing on all of those things. But what is the vision, the one theme by which you can measure what is going to fit underneath, what stays and what goes?
Is that often tied to, we want to achieve this outcome that's not necessarily tied to fundraising dollars per se, but it's the mission focal point for the year? And, that could be, hey, we want to fund a new food bank location, or we want to set up a new location for our mission, or we want to do X, Y, and Z research. Then you back yourself into, okay, in order to do that, we need X amount of fundraising dollars. And then you start to level down across activities, right? It sounds and feels simplistic in nature, but I think that's kind of where things start, right?
Totally. And for your fundraising department, it might be something like growing reliable revenue. Like that might be your theme for the whole year. And you can do that in many ways. And there are many steps you need to take along the way. But it's like, okay, then you can make sure everything you're doing is tracking toward that.
I think I know those as OKRs, objectives and key results. Or if you want to just say, here's our lofty goal and here's how we're going to do the subtasks to meet that, right? And how do we get there? And how do you start to understand and break down? For me, it's always looking backwards, analyzing past performance. Specifically, I'm looking for my top 2 to 3 channels that are performing, I know it, that are consistent, I can actually grow and enhance upon. And for some organizations, that could be, hey, the website's our primary chief digital acquisition tool. Great. What can we do to make that better? Maybe it's social media if you're a social forward organization and mission, right? Caroline, let's hope that you have some semblance of tracking in place. It doesn't have to be fancy. What are you looking at when it comes to analyzing past performance to then start to project growth trends over the coming year?
I start every new year doing a big audit. I did that when I was in-house, and I help organizations do that because a lot of times they don't have time, and getting fresh eyes is really, really helpful. But we're digging in on how did the evergreen stuff perform? Like, do we need to brush up our automated email journeys, our highest performing web pages? Could those use a little love? Like, how'd the evergreen stuff do? How can we enhance that? And then we look at campaign performance. Are things growing year over year? Did we see a dip? Why might that be? And just exploring, and then looking at like, okay, what's happening with the sector overall? And is our situation lining up with sector trends?
Using the past to fuel the future growth
Yes.
is always a safe bet if you're thinking about trying to push the gas on growth in certain channels. And so you've got your goals high level. You're working across the organization, across the nonprofit to get that together across teams, right? You start to understand, okay, we need this much money. Here's where it's performed in the past. So you have a concept of your primary operating channels of fundraising revenue. What are we doing from a looking forward perspective? Are you looking at over our goal of year by year and then backwards planning, quarter by quarter, month by month, week by week? How are you approaching these things to start to put the puzzle pieces together to build that plan to that end goal by end of 2025?
The way my brain works when I'm writing an annual plan, I start at the top and then I go down one layer at a time. So I have my like annual theme, and then I start quarter by quarter and I think about, okay, what's kind of the theme for each quarter to ladder up to that bigger vision? And what area are we really going to experiment around each quarter and do some testing? So I think it's nice to kind of follow the donor journey throughout the year. So maybe Q1 is like awareness. Let's test some really cool ways to tell our story and get new people in the door. And then Q2, maybe we're playing around with lead gen and testing different like lead magnets and lead gen strategies, and going like that quarter by quarter. Then underneath, what are all the monthly and weekly tactics to make that happen?
Do you look at major giving events and start to plug those in first and then kind of go around that? Or how does that work within the context of a larger year planning?
Yeah, I think you could like map out on your calendar what are the big relevant days, weeks, months for our cause. Absolutely. And make sure you're leveraging those. At the same time, don't only use those for fundraising. Like, have some fun. You can create your own week or day or month or campaign that has nothing to do with those. So I would encourage organizations to like use them and be aware of them, but also bust out and see if you can brand something that's just yours.
That's a great point. So we know like Giving Tuesday, there's a good chunk of nonprofits that focus on make sure that's a part of their play. And that's larger year-end giving. And we've talked about that to the cows come home, it feels like at this point, Caroline. But we know that, hey, shifting mindset to, hey, it's the last 45 days of the year, and these points are just points along this broader campaign. So where a lot of nonprofits, need to be shifting to really maximize output. And similar to that point, and I think you do a great job at outlining how important storytelling and using words to convey, you think about mission victories or stories directly from donors or how missions are impacting in real world, tying that back to donations and how the impact of even a $25 a month donation can make huge leaps and bounds and efforts, right? So there's everything from the actual research potentially being funded to overhead, or it's not a dirty word here. It makes things possible and move, right? Is there some sort of like mechanism of how you're looking at these little micro campaigns that support the larger year from start to finish, these moments of, as you mentioned, that you own, you create, you make this a thing yourself?
Think about it through the lens of testing and audience research. And for me, at least, that makes it all really fun. So it's like, okay, every quarter and then every month and every week, what's something big or small that I'm trying that's brand new, or an A/B test I'm running to get some new intel. And that is what pushes me to put out new types of content, to test different messages and see what sticks. And when you're doing that all year and finding ways to like survey your supporters and run polls and ask them why they made a donation, then come year end, you have this giant basket full of supporter insights and messaging to pull from. So it's not guesswork and just like throwing a dart. It's using their words and reflecting those back to them when you're making that ask at the end of the year.
Yeah, it's a great point to these campaigns. I'm terrible at this. I've had to work hard is even sketching. Hey, we want a newsletter that goes out during this moment to support this. We want these social posts to tie into the messaging, right? We need to set up maybe perhaps a donation page specifically for this campaign. And if you start to understand the moving pieces to these, you know how to set your time, your budget a lot. You could say no to things that pop up, ideally in a perfect world, right? I know better sometimes. Like, hey, these are my goals. These are what we need to go do to hit our goals. Is this fit into and support that? If not, then maybe this takes a back burner for at least a moment. In reality, like I know fire drills are everywhere all the time. I think you bring up this idea of testing within all this too. There is an era of like giving yourself a buffer to test. There are events, there are digital things, there are all the things that you could do. You set aside some time and budget. When I say budget, money, yes, but also time, resources to try new things. You'll never know unless you try. And one of the things you can't do if you want to hit that success mark for 2025 and beyond is, we're just going to do what we did last year. We'll be good.
Yeah.
That's not how the 1%, you get 1% better every day, right? Tactical perspective, what does testing look like? Do we need tools? Do we need anything like that to do it? Or is it simply just grabbing a spreadsheet, documenting what we're testing, find the results, and then going?
It can be both. I mean, if you have the tech, like if you're using iDonate, there's built-in functionality for A/B testing changes on your donation page. Amazing. If you don't have that, you could create 2 different pages, split your email list or split your ads and test those manually in a spreadsheet and see. You can do that with your emails. Like, are certain subject lines working better for us? Long versus short emails. Let's split our list and try 2 different things for a quarter and then see which one worked and roll with that. I think we just like get into ruts with our content and we're not asking for enough feedback either. Like, we're not asking donors and supporters to reply to our emails or complete a poll or explain why they care about the cause, share it on social. Like, we need to be getting that stuff back from them all year round and then using that to inform our activities.
There's the plug. I wasn't even going to do it too, but you did it. Yeah, obviously I'm a little biased. I love the fact that we've got codeless A/B tests you can set up without much effort.
It's so
And
rad.
10 clicks in about 5 minutes, you're off and running. But I think that also brings up an interesting point where at this point when I'm planning, I'm thinking about budgets for tech. We bring up tech, right? I'm taking a look at what money I might have allotted to get new resources, or do I need to reevaluate my tech stack? There are a lot of tricks if I'm in control or managing a budget to free up some flexibility across the greater part of a year in planning, right? I always like to, I refuse to buy any tech where I can't do like quarterly payments. I'm not paying up front for a whole year. I just don't want to, right? You think about the making sure resources are freed up from month to month, quarter to quarter. That's one of the tricks of the trade I've learned over the years. Also, I'm going to be using free tools whenever I can. I'm not above it. You don't have to pay for a high-end tool to get the benefits. You think about project planning, Google Sheets, there's plenty of templates out there that help you plan through it, right? Or spend a couple hours with ChatGPT, and it'll probably pump you out a good template, right? Asana gives you some limited capabilities, but it's still free too, right? If you get advanced with that, that's when they get you. That's where I get frustrated. Monday.com, similar way too, right? There's a lot of cool tools where it's that freemium version. You can save some money on the project planning because that is critical, especially as you're starting to plan out through the entirety of the year. Caroline, what are some of the other tech tools that you find that we'll say are cost effective, especially if you're balling on a budget? We all are these days, that are almost like a must have for digital fundraisers.
Oh my gosh. Well, these AI powered tools are popping up so fast, I cannot keep track. But I would say whichever thing is sucking up a lot of your time that you wish could be freed up to do some more like testing and creative work, there's probably now an affordable AI powered tool to help you get that done, whether it's grant writing or identifying which donors to steward. Like there is now a tool for everything. Of course, also Zapier to create integration. So you're not doing things like manually exporting your lists from MailChimp and then pulling them out. Like you can easily integrate and save a lot of time if you're doing still a lot of clunky, like importing, exporting, sorting, that kind of thing.
It's amazing how, it feels like a lot of time, maybe an hour or two up front, kind of setting all this up. But the dividends, you think about how much time you actually are saving over the course of a year back in your pocket to focus on finding the next donor story, telling the next story through digital means. That's the important stuff. Don't mess with tech if you don't need to. Automate the living daylights out of it.
And I'm using ChatGPT, the paid version, on an hourly basis. It's saving me time and it's just helping me like break through and get started on stuff. You can also, there's like Cause Writer with Whole Whale where you can train an AI writer to write in your organization's voice and tone so that you can pump out content that feels like you. Lots of time-saving AI tools at this point.
And we'll make sure to link that Cause Writer because that's phenomenal. I think one of the biggest things for me has always been I want a consistent brand voice no matter where I go. And so training that model with, content's already been written, your branding guide absorbs that. Oh my goodness, it's so good.
Super cool.
Yeah, if you follow me and I donate brand account, you'll notice that's probably like from where we started and now how we're evolving with what we say and how we say it. That's exactly what's going on. I'm not ashamed to say that. I created a bot that does that for me too.
Heck yeah.
And it saves you so much time. I am not a fast writer. I sit there and look at words for hours, it feels like, on posts. But I digress. Okay, so let's recap where we've been. So it's like, hey, set your budgets and your goals. Understand what the organization, the mission goal is, then work your way backwards. That'll start to give you plans. Ideally, you're starting then to understand the past channel performance. So then you can start to map what you expect out of those channels. Probably 2 to 3. Most organizations have 2 to 3 main channels they can rely on. What are the channels that you want to invest in to grow? And then you start to break things down into both a thematic elements, quarter by quarter, week by week, sometimes day by day. And you start to break down those target and goals when it comes to fundraising dollars to those events. You'll have a leftover amount typically It's going to be hypothetical too, because things dip and dive. That's just the way that things work. You have an understanding of hopefully some additional budget for tech to help you. Maybe it's outside resources like Caroline, my friend here, who does a lot of this stuff in tandem. And then to me, the last step is how are we going to measure or monitor our progress through the course of the year? And then how am I going to know when to make changes or adjustments? Caroline, what does that look like from you and your experience?
Benchmarks. It's like, it's all we've got is benchmarking yourself against last year and then looking for industry benchmarks. And in the last 12 months, there's been this like wonderful explosion in nonprofit digital benchmarks that weren't there for so long for advertising, for email, for donation page optimization. So now you can check like, okay, how am I doing? Not just compared to nonprofits at large, but compared to others my size or others in my cause area. I think that's like, I just live and die by the benchmarks, because especially when you're a team of one, sometimes you feel like you're looking around, am I doing this right?
And what are your go-to benchmarks? Mine are Next After. Ours seems to be a pretty consistent one. Do you have any other ones that you use in your back pocket or as a go-tos?
Neon puts out some good ones. There's like the Fundraising Effectiveness Project that puts out a lot of good stuff. I mean, I Donate has your own, like a lot of the tech tools and agencies are now putting out benchmarks. So if you're looking for something specific and you Google it, you might actually find it now, which is really exciting.
Even better if you use ChatGPT, because it's a lot quicker. I feel like a lot more specific,
Yep.
which is why I actually lose Google maybe 5% of the time these days. And I'm all in ChatGPT. And if you're not, like, there's no excuse. It's free and it's great and it's faster, it's more succinct, and it's more, I would say, specific to your needs. So get on that. Please get on that.
Yes.
Caroline, so we've got all this done. The last thing, because this is always cyclical, is thinking about debriefing and really planning for the next year. Yes, we're already thinking about the next year. When should that cycle start realistically? Because there's a lot that goes on in the back half of the year. So specifically Q4 for nonprofits typically, or at least we'll say October through the end of December. When should we start to fire up the engines for the next year's planning cycle within the previous year?
I'll tell you what I think should happen, and then I'll tell you when everyone comes to knock on my door, because they're totally different.
Yep.
Every summer, I start promoting, hey, do you want to work with me for year end and planning for the year ahead? Let's start in September or even August, y'all. But really in September, we're putting together our year end plan, which includes stewardship and gratitude activities for January. And like, okay, what's going to happen beyond with all of these new people and all of these people who have opened their hearts and wallets. I do always have some like really wonderful organizations that start with me in September. And then right now it's December 19th and I've got people banging my door down to make a plan for January. And sadly, it's just the way it goes.
I started mine in September of this year, and
That's
it's gone
great.
through. Well, it's gone. I started with this like hopes and dreams, and it's like morphed into like version like 1.2, version 1.25, version 2, version 2.3. And so I digress. And that's the other thing too to keep in mind. It's never too late to start, like ever. Even if you get to January, you're coming back from break and you're like, we need a plan, like do it. I'm like, there's no shame in that game, right? But then also don't expect it to be perfect the first time. If you do get it perfect, come find me, tell me how you did it. I'm sure Caroline would love to know too. Because it really isn't a thing. And it's meant to be an iterative process. Caroline, have you ever seen a perfect, untouched yearly plan?
My gosh. No, in fact, I write them for a lot of clients and then all year I can see them tracking changes in Google. And that doesn't upset me. That makes me happy because they're actually using it. And these things need to adjust. And the whole point with the testing and experimentation is you learn what's working and then edit your plan moving forward based on that.
Yeah, a good plan is meant to be broken,
Yes.
reshaped, evolved.
Yes.
I typically will actually do that month to month. For me, it's always been about finding what resonates and what's being latched onto. Sometimes a specific kind of content you just kind of stumble over and really, really picks off, and you want to push the gas and see where you can take that, right? It's not a problem. You just track. And again, going back to experimentation, you make sure you have a trending line. So, maybe it is just a spike over time. Maybe it's a longer trend that you can start to adopt and make part of your brand. Like, That's where the small incremental 1, 2, 3% increases start to compound month over month, week over week, year over year. Next thing you know, you have, potentially, mission defining work that's been done and fueled by these small iterative changes that started 3, 4 years ago, maybe.
Totally. And you need to be responsive. Like that's what's engaging and that's what raises money. So we're not saying like plan out all of your social posts and all of your emails for the whole year. Please do not do that. And the content that performs the best is when you're jumping on what's in the news or a new social trend. So like, please carve out the space and time to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's always on brand stuff, but give your space to be creative. Those social trends are fun to hop on if they're in brand, or space to experiment too. There's that buffer zone that should be built into every plan and every run. Caroline, we've got a pretty succinct, high, broad level overview of how to approach planning for a given year, but there's a lot of nuance, a lot of work that goes into this. For those that want help or need help or want the next steps, where can they find you in terms of Caroline help?
On LinkedIn. I live on LinkedIn. My website is marketeronamision.work. I actually have a free campaign planning workbook on there, which might be helpful if you're stuck and you just want to think through, like, for our bigger campaigns for next year, how do we craft this and measure it and make sure it's going to be successful? Email me, DM me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to hop on a call and brainstorm or chat through anything with anybody.
Sweet. I'll leave links directly to your LinkedIn profile in the notes of the show. That way people can find you, and I'll see if I can wrangle up that link to that campaign resource as well, as we're big fans of tactical how-tos and hands-on stuff. And then we pick up the last mile when and where needed is help. Caroline, I would be remiss to not say I love working with you, as you know. I'm looking forward to a 2025 full of this conversations around how to be better digital fundraisers. And thanks for what you do. I know, especially with a new kid, well, not so new, but still new within the year, it's a lot, right? And thank you so much for the energy, the expertise that you bring for the nonprofits that are listening and that we serve. Me being on the tech side, you being on the much more strategic side. Keep on doing you. I love it.
Thanks, Adam. You too. Happy holidays.
Yeah.
Happy New Year, everybody. And shout us both out if you need some ideas or inspiration for next year.
Perfect. Thanks, Caroline. To those listening, this has been Digitally Native. Thank you again for dropping in. This has been Campaign Planning, kind of a 101 how-to with Caroline Griffin from Marketer on a Mission. Until the next episode, which I believe should be around Google Ad Grant Management with my buddies over at Community Boost. I'm really excited about that. It should be in the next week or so. Until then, see you next time.
Adios.